Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Scale webinar series. My name is Emmanuel Effiong, and it's my pleasure and my privilege to welcome you all to today's webinar. I am the project manager on the Scale project at ACIOE Associates. Before I go further, I would be introducing the Scale Advocacy Advisor. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Ilya Yohana, the Advocacy Advisor of the Nigerian Scale Project, for his opening remarks.
Thank you all for the opportunity to join this webinar series. I bring you the greetings of the leadership of the project, and we have our colleague here, Nena, who will take us through a few of what we are doing around the CSO Atlas. So I'll just welcome Nena to take over from here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. My name is Nena Nkata. I'm the Knowledge Management Associate for the Scale Project. Thank you. So without wasting at the Nigerian Scale, we're building a national public directory for civil society organizations in Nigeria and a management information system. So it's called the CSO Atlas. The CSO Atlas was named by other CSOs in the space when we had a consultation around building an enabling environment for CSOs in Nigeria. So we came up with the name Atlas. So it's a one-stop hub for CSOs in Nigeria. So it's a two-in-one. Having access to the public directory also gives you access to the management information system. So just a bit of background. The MIS and the National Public Directory is part of the component 3 of the Nigerian Scale Project, where we are looking at improving policy and regulatory enabling environment for CSOs in Nigeria. So we know there are statutory regulations that organizations and CSOs have to abide, and there are about 8 of them which are compulsory, ranging from annual reporting, tax reporting, FIRS, National Health Insurance Scheme, and all that. But there are a bunch of them, but the 8 of them are compulsory. But what we are doing in this Scale project is we're looking at how can we have a regulatory enabling environment and regulate themselves. So drawing on instances around what happened in the last election in Zamfara and also in Adamawa State, where we had evidence of shrinking space and the government trying to stop the operations of civil societies in those states. But this is because we need to come together and build a public trust so we don't lose CSO's public trust and build legitimacy, accountability, and transparency. So on that note, what we are doing is in line with this, we're trying to see how we can institute our own regulatory mechanism that is free from statutory regulation and also allowing us to regulate ourselves differently. So CSOs has developed a model for self-regulation. So for you to operate, you have to certify yourself that you meet certain criteria to operate. And also drawing us to the instance where the lady that was called to bar was, her license was revoked from Bar Association. So we are looking at tilting towards that angle. And the whole aim is just for us to build public trust. We don't want to lose CSO's public trust. And we also want to build legitimacy. And the whole issue about self-regulation is also being established for your accountability and transparency. So we're looking at what is workable and what is doable within our environment, our culture, and most especially in Nigeria. So what's the CSO Atlas? So the CSO Atlas is a technology-based platform designed to enhance collaboration among civil society. So information sharing, which is part of the code of conduct that was developed for the civil society. And we're also looking at fostering strategic alliances between the government. We're also looking at fostering alliances between the donors, and also looking at fostering strategic alliances, really ongoing to that effect. We're also looking at strengthening the relations between CSOs and government. This is a better way for us to operate in a space and we still maintain our integrity and transparency. So the platform consists of the National Public Directory and the MIS. And so what's the objective of this platform is to promote effective coalition building and local resource mobilization through donors, private sector, and also other resource mobilization strategies by providing a user-friendly platform that is accessible to all and everybody in the CSO space, marginalized groups as well, that has limited access. So the platform is just to encourage participation and engagement among CSOs and stakeholders, promoting transparency and accountability. So one of the benefits of having this platform is that once we have a CSO that has registered on the CSO Atlas, it's a form of creating visibility for your organization, because once you are onboarded on the platform, donors, private sectors, other CSOs that work in the same thematic area, in the same service delivery area, can be able to spotlight other CSOs that operate in the water sector, in health, or in capacity building in River State, for example. Then I go onto the CSO Atlas and I know that ABCD organization is doing ABCD project. So the platform also gives you a leverage where you have access to a wide range of e-learning materials on the MIS, and you would be able to take courses as an organization, assigned organization staff taking courses, and then you can also assign some courses to your staff on that platform. So we have courses that will be ranging from advocacy, organizational development, and all of that relating to the advocacy that we do, because our staff is also part of what we do in our organizations. So these courses are looking to have certified courses. So once you partake in those courses, they are going to be certified by certificate award bodies. We're also looking at partnering with London School of Business. We're also in conversation with the Nigerian Stock Exchange for environment and social and government framework program that they have for CSOs in Nigeria. So it comes with a wide range of benefits. If you would want to be onboarded on the platform, because we are doing the first set of onboarding for CSOs on this platform, you can just go to www.csoatlas.com and you just follow the sign up process and then get your organization onboarded. Once you are approved, you get access to be viewed on the public interface, which is the directory. And then from your home office and from your back office, you have access to switch to the MIS, where you have access to opportunities. You would also have access to grant funding, opportunities, resources, and all that. And we're also looking at embedding the crowdfunding approach into the MIS, where you can also raise funds directly. So a bunch of features will be released as time goes on, but the first set of CSOs have already been onboarded. So I will.
Thank you so much, Nena, for that. I'm sure all representatives of CSOs on the call would want to take opportunity and advantage of the CSO Atlas. Okay, to proceed with the webinar, I would be introducing our facilitator for the. It is my immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Grace Daphill to facilitate the webinar. Thank you so much, Ma, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Emmanuel, for the opportunity to be part of this webinar series. All right, thank you so much. Just as Emmanuel had earlier said, social accountability is extremely a vital phenomenon with which the society is expected to use to shape the very essence of advocacy. There cannot be advocacy if you do not have the requisite evidence, because it will just be telltales or stories being told and all of that. And when there is no evidence base, the desired change may not be as effective as is expected. Social accountability is citizen-led action to hold public officials and service providers to account for the use of public resources. That said and done, this morning we are going to run through this presentation in the next 40 to 45 minutes, after which we are open to question and answer. And then after that, if there are other issues, we'll treat them, and then you can reach out to us for further discussions. On that note, I want to say, let's start the presentation. What is accountability? Accountability refers to the processes, norms, and structures that hold the population and public officials legally responsible for their actions, and that impose actions if they violate the law. As civil society, we are expected to be accountable for whatever resources that has been entrusted into our hands for the purpose of satisfying and ensuring that beneficiaries get the targeted services. And is there any way you can do that if you are not keeping records? And so accountability is to help us understand the processes, what are the norms, what are the structures that we must have in place. And if we are to hold our power holders accountable or to make them take responsibility for their actions, then we must be able to generate the necessary evidence to be able to advocate for such desired change. Accountability is a citizen-driven measure to complement and reinforce conventional mechanisms to ensure that our political office holders are held responsible to be able to give us whatever information in a transparent and honest manner with integrity assigned to such information being given. And how do we come about some of these things? We should have political checks and balances, accounting and auditing systems, as well as having administrative rules. And so that takes us to then what is social accountability? This is the approach toward building accountability that relies on civic engagement. The difference between the first definition and this is the fact that there is an engagement. Civic engagement could be by civil society organizations, it could be by ordinary citizens. Here we are saying we want to know exactly what you are doing. We want to know exactly how our resources are being spent. We want to appreciate whatever you are doing to bring about development. Is it following what it's supposed to be? Is it devoid of corruption? And so we are engaging actively as civil society or as ordinary citizens. Anybody can hold the government accountable. And once that is in place, while ordinary citizens or civil society holding the government accountable, we said to having social accountability. It is a broad range of actions and mechanisms that citizens, communities, independent media, and civil society can use to hold our public officials and even service providers accountable for whatever it is. Under the UNFPA's project, I think that was in 2013, a lot of civil societies were trained to be able to do budgets, to be able to, just a minute, to be able to hold the public officers accountable. We're trained to be able to track our budget. We're trained to be able to be involved in the budget development or preparation or planning processes. We're trained to be able to even measure the impact of budget performance. These are all tools that you will use when you're talking about social accountability. Also, it's a particular form of civic engagement, one in which citizens engage with the state for the purpose of holding the public officials accountable for the resources. We have mechanisms that need to be in place, and these mechanisms could be external or internal. The external, I refer to the vertical mechanisms, and then these are a little bit in contrast to the internal or horizontal mechanisms of accountability. The social mechanisms that we have referenced earlier is having those systems. For instance, under normal accountability, they will have policy checks, they will have audits. These are the internal mechanism, while the external, which is the vertical mechanism, is when the civic space is being actively initiated to be able to engage with these public officers in order to bring about the desired change we are talking about. And one important thing with the mechanism or vertical mechanism is the fact that we have elections. Here we are expected to use our voice through our votes to determine who we want. For instance, in the last elections in Nigeria, we saw a very strong revolution that took place. That it was no longer business as usual. It shows that we waited, for instance, the Senate. So many of them did not get re-elected. That has shown that there was engagement. We are holding them accountable, and because we are trying to entrench social accountability, a lot of them that we felt did not give us fair representation were voted out. Like in Kaduna State, where some of us live, in the southern Kaduna State, a former an Okada rider, as they would tag him, defeated a ranking House of Representative member from a party that was not even so strong as they claim, because they claimed that the party did not have structures, but that party came and swept that Southern Kaduna representative seat. This shows that people are beginning to speak, and that is the vertical mechanism of accountability that we are talking about. However, we should know that these elections in themselves are not as expected in some, because they cannot be without flaws. Like the presidential one is a clear case of, yes, we were not satisfied with certain things, and we tried to raise our voice to elect whoever we felt should be able to represent us. So these are the kind of mechanisms we're saying that social accountability utilizes. Why do we have to have social accountability? There are three basic reasons. One, governance. Two, for development effectiveness. And three, for empowerment. And when you talk about empowerment, it's not just to have economic empowerment. We are also talking about having social empowerment that will enable us to ensure that our voices are heard. And as our voices are heard, it's bringing about the desired positive change. And so social accountability helps us to understand what it is to contributing to improve governance, which allow you and I, ordinary citizens, to access information, voice our needs, and demand accountability between elections. This is a clear case that every 4 years in Nigeria, we go out to the polls to elect our desired leaders. And when we feel unsatisfied, we vote them out. So social accountability is what is empowering us to be able to do all of that. It helps us to bring about increased development effectiveness through better service delivery, achieved through improved public service delivery and more informed policy design. A lot of CSOs have been engaging at different levels. For instance, Scale is an upgrade or an expansion of the SACE project. And when you look at it, it was to strengthen civil society space to be able to engage effectively. And a lot of civil societies have been in the forefront engaging. And if you look at that, because of that, even funders, even public servants cannot provide services the way they are, because there are always people to hold them accountable, to always come out to say, you are not on the right track. For instance, we have heard in the news in the past few days, the monies that the claim has been released to humanitarian affairs. And then we begin to wonder how a ministry is giving 500 billion a month. What are they using these resources for? But the truth of the matter is, social accountability will make you to be able to go through this kind of news to know whether it's there may be an element of truth, but what is even the budget of Nigeria? The budget of Nigeria, is it up to 9 trillion that every month they are giving a ministry 500 billion? So from there, you begin to measure, you begin to think, what is the impact? What will be the effectiveness? What kind of developmental issues do we expect to see to be able to say that we have better service delivery? So this is what social accountability helps us to do. It also helps us to contribute to poverty reduction through more proper policy design, improve service delivery, and empowerment. Social accountability has helped Nigeria to re-strategize. For instance, it was seen that because of the outcry from the civil society space, from ordinary citizens, the social protection program, all this while, has been taking different forms. However, with the coming of this last government, even though there are so many questions or many ills around them, but we still give them the credit that they have tried to institutionalize which when we get to the tools, you will see that institutionalization is something that will help us to be able to have effective social accountability system that will help us to build the desired advocacy evidence that we need to bring about the desired change. So this is something that social accountability has helped us to achieve. And it's also helped us to have inclusion on all sides. For instance, through social accountability and the project I referred to earlier under the UNFPA, you discover that a lot of women groups, because gender mainstreaming, gender integration, gender analysis, everything that had to do with gender interactions were brought to the limelight. If there was no social accountability mechanism in place, I'm sure up to now, the issue of gender would have still been under the carpet. And that is why we are saying that social accountability also helps us to offer mechanisms to monitor and protect human rights as it underlines the rights of citizens and expect and ensure that government acts in the best interest of the people. It also helps to expand opportunities to participate at the macro level. You know, the accountability is internal, while the social accountability is looking more at the external issues. Here, it's on a larger scale. It's not just looking at just the nitty gritty, okay, how much money came in, how much was released, and how much was spent. But it goes beyond that because it will also, yes, you have expended this money. What is the impact of that expenditure? What is the impact of your policy? What is the impact of the services that you are delivering? So this is social accountability helps to expand such opportunities. It also helps us to monitor government performances, giving us opportunity to demand for transparency. And then where government fails, it helps us to also expose such failures. And that is why the issue of corruption is being brought to the limelight. As we speak, as at Monday, I believe that we all know that there was an announcement that the Bawa, the immediate past EFCC chair, I call him immediate past because he has been removed and another person is there so that they can be able to invest. This is because of the kind of outcry that came from the populace. This is the kind of outcry that has helped to bring about transparency. Well, we are not yet there, but we hope to get there. For instance, when I had to work with some group in Borno State to build their capacity on budget advocacy for the state with regards to taking up services, especially the sexual and reproductive health related services. We discovered that a lot of people did not even know what to do. And so after the training, I was able to engage, because I supported them to come up with the policy briefs and all of that, to engage with the government of Borno State. And as we speak, as from 2022 in their budget, they made concerted efforts to not just talk glossary over issues of reproductive health, but they went to the extent of promoting those services that could bring about healthiness of the mother. They concentrated a lot around the maternal health, and that is because of the advocacy that was done. And it's not just the state government, they also ensure that all the other MDAs within the state were able to make something in their budget down to the primary health care so that women can take up a lot of services to be able to help better lives and all of that. And so what are the pillars of social accountability? We have 4 things that we should have at the back of our minds when we are talking about social accountability. Do we have organized and capable citizen groups? Thank God for US scale projects that is being anchored today by ACOIE. This is kind of opening our eyes and helping us to organize ourselves into a better group. Yes, a lot of groups like CISLAC leading a lot of advocacy, but beyond that, there is a need to have more organized groups so that we can have a better and robust engagement. Once we have organized and capable groups, then we'll be able to engage at all levels. It shouldn't be just at the national level we are talking about engagement or at the state level. A lot of resources, for instance, are even in the local government level. Before now, a lot of people saw the local government level as the conduit pipe to which monies are siphoned. And that's why the government or the state level fought for a very long time not to allow the local government autonomy. But if we have local groups in the local government knowing what to do and they can engage, I can assure you that even the local government that look a little bit redundant will begin to wake up to their responsibilities, because we need to begin to hold them accountable. And then we won't be having wastages or leaking pipes at that level. Another pillar we need to have at the back of our minds, we need to identify who are those government champions who are willing to engage. Engagement at policy level, engagement at the budget and bill appropriation level, engagement at the implementation of this level of budget implementation, as well as engagement even at the audit level. Without us identifying those champions, then our social accountability can have a lot of setback, a lot of bottlenecks, and a lot of drawbacks that will make us not to be able to achieve what we set out to achieve with regards to those changes. Because advocacy is all about bringing about desired change. And so social accountability is that vehicle that will help us to have those desired and concrete evidence-based advocacy. Another thing is we need to know what are those issues, because if you are doing an advocacy and you have not done your work, you've not gathered your data, and you have not been able to put together to come up with those concrete issues that you want addressed, then you are just you're just running around in circles. And so for you to be able to have those concrete things, you need to be focused. And for you to be focused, you need to know, okay, what is the context with which I'm designing this advocacy? What is the context, and is it culturally appropriate? Yes, for instance, a lot of us have issues around the LGBT. Yes, is it their health? Is it their right to want to promote? But within the context of Nigeria, looking at our legal system, looking at our policy environment, is it really right? And if it is not right, how do we go about it? Because if you don't know how to go about it, that is why certain agitations are dead. In short, they are dead on arrival, because we did not look at it from the angle of the context. We did not look at it from the angle of cultural appropriateness. And once that is missing, I can assure us that no matter how much we want to sound, how organized we are, we may not be getting the desired result. So it is very appropriate that we understand the context and cultural appropriateness. And the last pillar is, what is our accessibility to information? In Nigeria, we have the Freedom of Information Bill, Freedom of Information Act that has been passed. But how many of us understand how and at what point do we call this bill provisions to action so that we'll be able to engage meaningfully without you having the requisite and relevant information? Yes, you can have plenty of information, but if it is not relevant, you cannot utilize it properly. And so access to this information is very key. Access here, we are looking at the reliability, the integrity. We are looking at the angle of it's devoid of any kind of fakeness, so that the genuinity will determine how it is going to be accepted. And so what are these tools that will help us to be able to engage? We have community scorecards. And when we talk about community, I'm not looking at a community as villages. I'm looking at community in the context of the kind of services, the kind of projects, the kind of policies that are coming out. So for instance, if we carry the community health, for instance, we'll be looking at their scorecard with regards to issues of maternal health. We should be looking at issues of funding for all the holistic and the wellness, because health, to be health doesn't mean there is no sickness. It's not just the absence of sickness, but we are talking about the totality of the well-being of the individual. So looking at all of that, the scorecard will help us to be able to know whether they are right or whether they are still lagging behind, whether there are things they need to improve upon, because these are things that will help you. Also, social audits. when you talk about social audits, you're looking at what are those social amenities we're supposed to have, and what is the quality, because audit helps us to see the quality, the relevance, the effectiveness, and the efficiency. So when you look at this from the angle of social amenities and also social interactions and social opportunities, and also your ability to participate in your civic responsibility, you are having the tool for social accountability. Public expenditure tracking surveys, these are things that when you go online, you should be able to have easy access to it. And these are things that can help you to do proper analysis, to be able to now generate your evidence in terms of your data, to be able to engage properly. We also have independent budget. And what do we mean? As a government, they have their budget, but nothing stops us from doing what we call shadow budget. Shadow budget here means a civil society coming together to put together a budget that they feel should be able to run the governance of a country, of a state, of a local government successfully. Yes, government will sit to do their own. And one funny thing, because I did some analysis when I was doing research on child labor in Nigeria between the period 2015 to 2020. And I discovered that the budget is as if there is no basis. They just keep adding. You see some places the budget is static. They are not looking at cost of inflation. There is no criteria for the budget of Nigeria. I'm sorry to say that, but that was my finding. I just discovered that they keep adding, or in some places they just leave it static, or they just leave it, or they reduce without any justification for why they came about that. Is that the kind of budget we should be relying on? So having an independent budget will also help you to say, okay, comparatively, these are the realistic things on ground. Inflation, cost of living, or standard of living, the GDP, and other economic issues and variables. We'll be able to bring it into context when we are preparing an independent budget outside the government, and then we can sit at the table with the government and say, okay, you claim that you needed 30 trillion to be able to do this, but from our analysis and best practices and realistic things on the ground, this is what we really need to run this particular kind of government and all of that. Like this morning, the World Bank was saying that over the last how many years, we had wasted over 30 trillion naira, all in the name of fuel subsidy. If we had our own budget, especially looking at it from the angle of they were doing fuel swap, and yet we claim we're paying budget, we'll be able paying subsidy, sorry. We'll be able to now engage the government and say, it is not true. Why it's just about 90 or 100 people holding the government or the whole country to ransom. But when you don't have such things, you cannot be able to engage. So having an independent budget is one serious social accountability too. Also, we should have citizen charters. Here, when we talk about citizen charter, for instance, when we are doing elections, we should be able to have an agreement in writing this time around with our political leaders. A lot of them will come read out beautiful manifestos, and after that, when you want to look at the scorecards at the end of maybe 6 months, 100 days in office, after 4 years, there is nothing to really show. And then even when you want to talk, because they know a lot of people are hungry, they'll just dangle another small change in their faces. But when there is an agreement, there is a charter between us and our elected persons, for instance, we'll be able to hold them. Yes, you are giving us these things, but it's even our right. For instance, in Nigeria, when a rep or through constituency projects or a governor constructs a road, or construct a hospital or clinic, and or refurbishes vehicles and give to the security, we all gather to clap for them. But when there is a charter, it is your responsibility to provide all of this. It's not an achievement. As far as someone like me is concerned, it's not an achievement, because you are supposed to provide the social amenities, for instance, that I need for my existence. And so because of that, we are not holding these people as accountable as we should. And so such tool can help us. Also, having things like gender responsive budget analysis. Yes, you are providing so many things for everybody, but is it everything that everybody needs? We should be able to trim down certain things to say, okay, based on this, and then also for social inclusion, we should be able to say, okay, this is what should be in place, because this is the requirement, or these are the expectations, the needs of the female, and these are the needs of the male, and then that should also guide the kind of appropriations we have. So if you have that in place, it will also help you to engage properly. Also issues of public revenue monitoring, and also using public hearings when bills are being discussed. It's a good opportunity, it's a good social accountability too, because during public hearing, we'll be able to counter clauses that we feel are not in support of all issues, are not practicable, or they are not in line with human rights provision. For instance, the bill to regulate CSOs, it was at the public hearing that we were able to know all the smuggled in clauses, and a lot of CSOs stood against it, and up to today, we are still where we are. So what are the building blocks for social accountability, or what are the key elements? We need to learn to mobilize around the entry point. And when we talk about mobilizing around the entry point, it's the first step to identifying and developing a strategy. For instance, we need to begin to prioritize. It's at that stage that you say, okay, what are the priority? What are the issues? What are the problems? And when you are developing that, when you're trying to mobilize at that entry point, you'll be able to say, okay, this is supposed to be specific. You don't need, and then, okay, is it general? Or at what level? You know, you define everything. We call it defining the scope around that particular area. You know, you need to be able to say, okay, this is what I really want to do, because if that is what you want to do, then to be able to guide you, okay, so if there is poor health, or there is poor education, then at which point are we going to engage in? It will be at the point they are preparing for the allocation of budgets, or allocation of resources to that particular issue you have identified. So for me, for instance, potential entry points might include you discovering the inefficiencies or corruption within the national distribution system, or the performance of local service providers. For instance, if we discover that in the course of our assessment, education is at the background, and that is why strikes keep going on and all of that, and children keep staying home and all of that. So at that point, you begin to say, okay, so what is really the problem? And so once you identify the problem, you'll be able to now know where to go in. Is it corruption that has been the problem that has been bringing this incessant strike? And then based on that, you'll be able to now say, okay, we are going to do 1, 2, 3 to be able to block this kind of interaction. Do we need to change people? So this will not come up in your strategy for engagement and all of that. So we need to know at which point do we need to, and for you to be able to identify those issues, you're already on the right track. Another building block is building information and evidence. Here, we are looking at issues of accessing or generating relevant information and building a credible evidence base that will serve to hold public officials accountable. For instance, you will look at issues around, if we take the example of the education sector that I've just said, you will look at, okay, were they supposed to bring in chairs, tables into the school? You will look at it from both the supply and the demand angle, in the sense that, okay, what is the data that I need from the supply side? You go to the government, you have, how many desks did you ask them to bring into a particular school? What is the budget like and all of that? And also you will go to the side of the demand, which is, for the example of the school, we look at, okay, the users, the school teachers, the school heads, how many desks were you supposed to be expecting? Where was the supplier able to deliver that requisite number? And then you can now be able to now, okay, based on this information, this is where the leakage is. From the government side, is it that in the course of awarding the contract, it was overblown? Or is it from the part of the beneficiaries? Did they waste or did they deliberately remove certain desks from the school so that it will look as if it's not complete? Because at times some people say, this is my own national cake, let me grab it. Is that kind of, so that will help you to be able to build your information and then know when to come in with the necessary evidence. Another thing you need to look out for when you're talking about building information or evidence base is the fact that how relevant was the data and information to you? Once you obtain it, relevance here, we're looking at the source as well as the credibility and also its usefulness to the utilization you have at mind. And once you obtain it, you need to interpret it. And the interpretation comes with analysis. Because if you just get that, okay, I went to this school, I saw broken chairs. Yes, so how does that affect everybody? But when we're able to say, okay, due to the broken chairs, the students do not have access to sitting comfortably, and because they're sitting on the ground and stings these children, I know so many things. Then you begin to say, okay, because of 1, 2, 3, not having a good desk in school is affecting the learning and the performance of children. That way you have analyzed and you have interpreted, and that will now help you to now say, okay, based on this, we need to protest and say, school, local government education authority, UB or whichever relevant agency that we're engaging with or whichever government we're engaging with, we expect you to provide so number of things that so that we'll be able to ensure that that is overcome. Another building block is going public. Please, it's not every information that you analyze and interpret that must go to the public. When you are bringing or taking whatever analysis you have as CSOs to the public, please, you need to understand that you must have a data that has integrity. You must be able to use appropriate channels. Because if you are just going public, because for instance, the information in the social media space, at the end of the day, we discover that over 70% of some information are fake. For instance, the example I gave earlier that said they give Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs 500 billion, not million, no, 500 billion naira every month. And then you have looked at it, it's okay, that is why the homegrown school feeding program was having so much money, too many players. It's okay, the Jeep, okay, the conditional cash transfer. Without you, yes, you didn't really take your time to do the analysis properly. And then you now go, they say, it's true, it's 500 billion. We see them flying all over the place. We see them doing so many elephant projects. But forgetting that, what is the total budget of Nigeria? Because when you look at 500 billion per month, it means it's translating to 6 trillion naira in Nigeria per annum. How much is our total budget as a country? So you don't just go out there to be able to just start talking anyhow. You need to bring information and findings that have integrity, that are genuine. And this is because you need that to be able to engage properly. Also, how to be able to go public is that you should be able to back whatever information with the necessary evidence. You don't just splash things because you want to be heard. You don't just accuse people or the government officials or service providers just because you want to gain cognizance, you want to draw followership to yourself. Make sure that there is effective strategy and mechanisms that are able to translate the data that you have generated in the other building block to be able to be concrete, and then you will now transmit this relevant information to the necessary actors. You don't just go public, going through social media without first engaging in writing with the relevant people or persons you need to draw their attention, who have the position to act on it. So interacting with them at times directly, and you also understanding some of the issues will help you to know what kind of information you should be able to pass to the general public. And then another building block, if you want to succeed, is the fact that you need rallying support and you need to build coalition. Informing citizens of their rights and responsibilities, engaging their interests and mobilizing them to build coalitions and partnerships with different stakeholders is a core aspect of social accountability. A broom cannot sweep an environment alone. You need a bunch of brooms to be able to sweep and sweep effectively. It's the same thing with engaging in advocacy and bringing about the desired change. One tree cannot make a forest. And so looking at that, there is a need for us to begin to come together as CSOs with interest. For instance, CSOs that have strength, interest, that have vision, goal in the health sector can come together to influence policy changes in the health sector. No one person can do it alone. So for every social accountability initiative to be able to contribute meaningfully, you need to engage, you need to inform, and then you need to mobilize support. Another building block is advocating and negotiating changes. You going to bribe is not lobbying. Some of us see bribery, okay, we need to put the interest of this particular person when you are asking for certain information. Okay, if the person is not going to release the document without exchange of brown envelope, you're doing all of that. You are not building or using social accountability. You should be able to have the requisite advocacy knowledge, be able to know when, how to be engaged. You need to look at, okay, what would be the hindrances, identifying such, and be able to come up with innovative strategy that will counter such obstacles. And then based on that, you need to have negotiating or negotiation skills. Because if you cannot negotiate effectively and you want to always have it your way, then you cannot be talking about social accountability. You need to engage directly and interact with those people. Because, for instance, we want more appropriation for certain issues. If you are not at the preparatory stage, there's no way you'll be able to even talk about, okay, based on from year 1 to year 3 that we have analyzed, this is the gap we found. And because of these gaps, we don't want you to repeat the same thing, but this is what we need to do based on the economic indices. This is how this year's budget should run. You will not be able to negotiate at that level. So you need to know when, how to be able to engage appropriately. And then when you're negotiating change, you also need to learn to know and identify opportunities so that you'll be able to now key into those opportunities. And opportunity will not come and say, here I am. You always need to be vigilant to be able to identify those opportunities, and by so doing, you'll be able to negotiate the required change. And so what methodology do we have to build evidence for advocacy? There are certain stages of policy and budget cycles. And so you need to understand, okay, what is the stage? And then what accountability tools or application do you want to bring on board? The policy budget preparatory stage, which is usually the first stage, there we need participatory policy budget formulation. The formulation is based on what I have just explained. You'll be able to sit, okay, you have also drafted your own alternate or independent shadow budget. You have also come up with a similar policy that you know that the government is working on, so that at their own preparatory stage, you also have something. And at that formulation stage, you come up with your own evidence-based document to say, okay, this is what we feel should be contributory to whatever you are doing. At the analysis stage, we should also have independent policy budget analysis as our tool. So if you do not have those tools, and it's not that you must do everything yourself, where you don't have the competences, please approach relevant professionals. Because when you approach the relevant professionals, they'll be able to guide you to be able to come up with the appropriate and relevant information that you need to be able to then present as the analysis. Please, nobody knows it all. We all need each other, but you need to identify how to go about utilization of thought. And then at the policy budget implementation stage, we have the tool, social accountability tool that we're expected to use there as the participatory public expenditure input tracking. As they're implementing, you should be tracking, because if you cannot track, you cannot engage. You cannot wake up and say, okay, yes, they have implemented, you didn't track, so what basis are you going to be engaging with them? And then they have the monitoring and evaluation stage. At the monitoring and evaluation stage, we have two components of social applications or tools that we can use. One, for the monitoring, we need to have participatory performance monitoring. It's not, okay, yes, we see you doing so, but we need to know whether you are going according to the milestones that has been set. If it's not according to the milestone, then you can quickly draw their attention to that we are not following what we say we are set out to do. Because if you do not monitor performance, you cannot evaluate impact. Because coming to evaluate impact is as if you are just coming from the blues to do something else. So looking at that, you need the participatory performance monitoring to be able to monitor when they are monitoring either the budget or the policy that we desire changes about. And then for the monitoring and evaluation, we also need to engage with participatory impact evaluation. When you talk about participatory impact evaluation, you're not talking of just one person going to the field and asking questions. You also allow communities, beneficiaries, and other stakeholders to make their inputs, even to the design of the evaluation, impact evaluation assessment tool. Based on that, they are also to make inputs, give you feedback after the application. And also you owe them a duty to be able to give them a feedback, either using town hall meeting, the media, both traditional, social, and cultural media approaches, to be able to give them the feedback. Because even by that feedback, you'll be able to know whether the impact that you had gathered information or you have used your questionnaire to be able to identify whether it is real or not. Because as you begin to discuss, they'll be able to tell you certain things. So at every stage, we should know the social accountability tool that we should be able to apply. And so looking at building evidence for advocacy. In furtherance, we are saying that CSO should review budgets in order to assess whether allocation match the government and now social commitments. These are things I have been saying over and over again. I'm only just bringing it out for the purpose of emphasis. So at all levels, whether or not citizens have participated in budget formulation, efforts should be made to publicize and encourage debate around the context of this budget, so that it can serve to enhance public understanding. If we do not publicize some of these things and there's no participation per se, I can assure us that at the end, people begin to ask questions and then make it look as if nothing has actually taken place, especially when you come to impact evaluation. And so we play a key role as CSOs to be able to ensure that we review, we critique. When you talk about criticism, we are looking at you objectively bringing out the negative side of something. And even if there's a positivity in it, you will still highlight it, but if there is need for expansion, then you'll be able to indicate such. So looking at it, we have a whole lot of things to do as CSOs to be able to bring about or build evidence for advocacy. And then how do we succeed as CSOs? One, you need to understand and utilize political context and culture. When you do not understand the existing political context and culture, such as whether the political regime is democratic, is a multi-party system, or there is basic political and civil rights guarantee, then you will not be able to succeed in the advocacy. But when you understand these things, for instance, Nigeria is a multi-party system. But how really is the multi-party system? If you are to do analysis, today some people are in APC, tomorrow they say they have moved to PDP, next tomorrow they're in Labour Party, next tomorrow they are back to APC. Will you still look at it as a multi-party system? If it's still a yes, then what are the reasons behind all this cross-carpeting, and how do we ensure that the cross-carpeting does not affect the issue that we want to bring to the table? So these are certain things. And then you need to understand, okay, do I have my political and civil rights guaranteed? Do I have access to information? Like in North Korea, you dare not, in short, they say Facebook, I said they said because I've watched it on different traditional, cultural and social media platform, whereby you are not free. The freedom there is completely out of it. You know, no freedom of religion, no freedom of expression, and all of that. So if you know you're not having access to this information, then you cannot succeed in your approach to whatever change you desire. However, Nigeria is blessed. We can say to a large extent we have freedom of information, although in some state governors turned themselves into lords that you dare not say anything against them. Because before you even finish what you're saying, you will find yourself either in the grave, or you will find yourself in the hospital with life-threatening injuries. In this country, a woman leader was once burnt to death in her house because she tried to stand against the government of the day in her state, and they are from different parties. So you need to now be careful. That does not mean you should keep quiet on how you're going to engage, because that woman spoke. Yes, I don't know what she might have said to have angered, because they didn't give those details. However, from findings, they just know that she was a thorn in the flesh of that particular government, and because she was educating her people that in 2019, they must not vote for the same set of people because they have not given them the dividends of democracy and stuff like that. They cut her life short, showing that there was no freedom of expression guaranteed in that particular state in Nigeria. Also, understanding and utilization of political context entails that you need to understand the existence of underlying factors and potential risk that their absence may pose and must be taken into account when planning social accountability initiatives. What are those underlying political factors? What are those underlying cultural factors? For instance, if not up to the time the Supreme Court gave a judgment that women could inherit, a lot of women, when it comes to issue of inheritance, were at a disadvantaged stage, especially from so many states in Nigeria. It's not only the southeastern states. In short, in a particular tribe that I'm very, very much aware about, because I had a personal experience there. When a girl is getting married, whatever you have acquired before marriage, including your clothing, the day you are going to your husband's house, you must drop everything in your father's house. These are gender-based issues. And so some of us were able to start by advocating within our families to bring about those changes that times are changing. And this is a lady that has worked for herself, earned her money, yet they are saying she must drop everything she ever acquired in her father's house. So looking at that, we need to know what are those factors that necessitated this. There were so many reasons. So if we didn't understand those factors and we just say you need to stop, I'm sure that up to now that culture would have still been going on in that particular environment. Also, understanding and utilization of political context, you know, to look at it from the angle of the law. You also need to look at it from the angle of what are those institutions that are in existence, and also from the angle of what are the social cultural factors. And let's have this at the back of our minds that even if there is an unfavorable context, that does not mean we cannot advocate for changes. I don't know if I'm saying something, if you get me. Yes, the environment, the political climate may be toxic, but that does not mean we should not speak out. That does not mean we cannot speak out, just that the strategy with which you're going to use to speak out may change. It means the strategies you're going to be engaging or deploying, you need to be very careful, with a lot of care being brought into whatever you're doing. But that should not stop us when we need to engage to bring about social change. For instance, the issue of subsidy removal. It has been so toxic, but that does not mean we shouldn't speak to it. Speaking to it here means that we need to know the facts. What are the reasons? Yes, it's a good policy according to the promoters to remove the subsidy, but before you remove it, we expected that there should have been a kind of palliative in place so that we can be able to absorb the shock and the side effects or the effects of the removal. That is what some of us are saying. For me, I'm very happy subsidy was removed because from the beginning it was a fraud. People were Nigerians swapping oil, crude for refined oil, yet they claim they are paying for people to import. To the extent that I think last week, I watched it on, is it Arise? That Cameroonians were protesting because they removed oil fuel subsidy in Nigeria. And a lot of people were asking, why should Cameroon be protesting? And I say, yes, the price has gone up because all those oil that were smuggling to those states are no longer available because person cannot just give away, because it was like the excess of my money through oil I was taking to the neighboring country. All of that, I had to take my time to explain all of that to the person. And the person said, wow, that means the intention is very great and it's necessary. And also, for instance, during the cashless society, cashless period, for me, I saw it as a good fiscal policy, fiscal and monetary policy, but it was wrong timing. Wrong timing in the sense that you do not come overnight. Yes, they gave about 2 months grace for you to be able to prepare yourself. But beyond giving the people time to prepare, were the financial institutions well equipped and prepared to be able to absorb that cashless cashless policy? For instance, a lot of them, the banks didn't have their bandwidth for, let's say, cash transactions were not wide or big enough. And that was when you go a lot of failed transfers, POS, you cannot do, your ATM is not working because so many people suddenly were trying to key into a very limited space. And so that brought a lot of pain, so to say, on the consumers of this particular policy. And that's why a lot of people could not appreciate it. But on the positive side, it led to reduction in kidnapping because nobody wants them to be tracked or their monies tracked through the transactions. Even in some government settings, it aided to bring down a lot of corruption practices and all of that. So it had its positive side. So that doesn't mean that because the environment or the political air is toxic, we should not be able to speak. We will speak, but we're using different and appropriate strategy. How do we succeed? Just as I mentioned earlier, institutionalization of our social accountability initiative will make a huge difference. And here we are saying it shouldn't be, it's not one cap fits all. There are certain issues that will make us to have ad hoc collaborations and network building. As soon as that issue is resolved, everybody go their separate ways. But also, it's good to also have it institutionalized that continually we are monitoring and tracking and speaking about a particular issue, especially for all that have shared vision. However, for also say to be more sustainable, then there is a need to have a hybrid approach. It's not just a one-off or institutionalization. It's good to have the two working together, especially when there are issues, because whether we like it or not, issues, problems will keep coming up, but our ability to resolve it is what makes the difference. And also, it's going to be more effective when we combine the methodology, the institutionalization, as well as the ad hoc approaches that we may be taking. Also, when you are talking about succeeding, what is our capacity as CSOs? This is another factor we need to look at. What is our membership? What is our technical expertise? What is our advocacy skill? What is our ability or capacity to mobilize effectively? When you are not able to do all of that as CSOs, then we have not yet started. Or even if it's different groups trying to come together, when you have issues with regards to your numeration, your capacity, technical skill, you may not be able to effectively deliver that. And then another way is you also need to look at what is the state capacity. Because if you just want to engage without you understanding that is a state a failed state, is the state on the path to destruction, like a lot of us see Nigeria as a failed state, but some of us still believe that Nigeria is not really a failed state yet. We are not getting so many things right, but that does not mean we should write it off. Rather, it's an opportunity to sit down. What are those institutions that we need to have in place? What are those capacity building initiatives we need to bring in place to be able to ensure that whatever we want to hold them accountable to or for are really what we should be holding them accountable for or to. And so we need to look at it from the angle of the ability to produce reports, accounts, because you'll be shocked that, for instance, I had an experience sometime last week. There was a file I worked on for a group I'm consulting, is a government agency. And we started looking for the file. And what came to my mind is there no a movement register that once it is treated at a particular point and is moving to the next point, there should be a flow. And we couldn't track it because we didn't see any register. It was just file moving and the file keeps getting fat as they add more documents and all of that. So at the end, I saw that as a gap and I've raised it with the requisite department and we are currently working on it. For instance, if you want to now engage with such a body, where do you start from? What information do you think they can give you for you to have a meaningful engagement? So we need to also look at the accountability mechanism or systems they have in place if you're talking about engaging, and then how functional are these systems or whatever what they have in place. Because if it's not there, then it will just be chasing shadows. Another one is our access to information. Availability and reliability of public documents and data is essential. Social accountability efforts may need to focus on securing freedom of information as enshrined in the Freedom of Information Act. We also need to see how do we address the lack of political will to disclose. You will come to some places, you are looking for something that should be ordinarily be in the public domain. They'll tell you cannot have access to it and all of that. So these are things that if you are able to help them put in place, then you'll be able to succeed in bringing about social accountability. How is our engagement with the media? A lot of us just is when we want to chase cloud that we go to the media, but we need to know when and how to utilize our media space because they are very critical in promoting social accountability. And how independent are our media? In this same country, in years past, we'll see them clambering down or clambering or closing media outfits that tend not to speak favorably for certain government persons. And so if we need to succeed, then we need to appreciate the fact that independent media is very key. But even if independent media is key, because they are the ones that easily can disseminate and reach the local places, especially the traditional media outfit, you should also ensure that the information that they are disseminating has integrity. Without integrity, without genuineness, without truthfulness, will be inciting the populace against the government. And that would truncate whatever governance that we have in place. Then, another thing we need to do is how do we engage in our interaction between the civil space, civil engagement space, and the state. You cannot just sit one place condemning the government, talking about the government without you engaging with them. Even for donor partners. For instance, because social accountability is not just about the government alone, but also for people around, even service providers, even donor agencies. A lot of us do not understand and appreciate their working, and we are not taking our time to interact with them. Rather, we sit and criticize them, we write whatever comes to our fancy. That way, we will not succeed. However, but if we improve and there's effective interaction between civil society and the state, or between civil society or the concerned groups and the service providers, I can assure us that a lot of things will begin to fall in place. And so Ackman said, a unilateral state action normally ends up in manipulation, while a unilateral social action often ends up in repression and violence by the state. So we need to know that we need to engage meaningfully so that the most productive results, which usually will arise when both sides actively participate, will be something that will help us to begin to look at succeeding as, that will help us succeed as social actors trying to bring about positive changes. And so mutual participation does not necessarily depend upon agreement or trust, and that even conflict and suspicion can lead to effective state society synergy. What I'm trying to say in essence is the fact that even when we suspect each other and we are in conflict with each other, we can begin to engage, because that way, okay, I don't trust this person, but by the time you start engaging, it will help to ease out the suspicion. So it's not only when there is an agreement that we need to interact, it's not only when we have trust that we need to interact, even when you feel that what they are doing, you are not comfortable, you need to come out to engage and interact so that you'll be able to now know how to go about it. And at the end, the desired result is gotten. So in conclusion, social accountability efforts on the part of citizens and civil society organizations can serve to create a new effective vertical mechanisms of accountability. I earlier talked about the vertical accountability mechanism, which is the civic engagement, while the horizontal, which is the internal, are those there are mechanisms to like having an audit, internal audit, and all of that. Even in civil society space, we see that we have external audit. Yes, we have internal auditors, but we also see external auditors coming in to help verify and validate whatever systems or documents we have. That is to lead credence to whatever we are doing. So it's the same thing we are saying, that when there's social accountability effort and it is creating or is being utilized using effective vertical mechanisms, it will help to strengthen the horizontal ones. When you are coming and you are engaging with them, they begin to see, okay, if our systems internally are not working, they begin to put in measures to ensure that it begins to work. And so this in turn will result in better governance, improve public service delivery, and enhance development effectiveness. Thank you very much. And then we have the references. In the course of the putting this together, we had to consult one or two documents to show that we are not just, it's not just about our experience, but also other people have walked the talk And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel in certain issues. Like you see me quoting the Ockman. The Ockman quotation came out from the work of Carmen Melina with Raina Foster Jamay Singh, don't mind the name, in the work Social Accountability and Introduction to the Concept and Emerging Practice, especially participation and civic engagement. So on that note, I want to say thank you for listening, and then you can come up with the questions so that we can run. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grace. That was very insightful, very educative. I like how you tied down these social mechanisms to past experiences, the social accountability mechanisms, as well as sharing light on the detailed steps that can be utilized by civil society to build evidence. Very important that you also share some tools so that we're not just speaking in theory, but we have some practical tools that can be employed and deployed to ensure that we build evidence for social accountability in our work as advocates. And the Q&A have some questions, and so I'm just going to be reading them, and I think I'll just take the questions one after the other. Okay, so the first question is on the availability of data. So the participant says there is no evidence that can be built without substantial data to back it up. Nigeria is a country that is experiencing data poverty, as we don't have the necessary databases such as population, birth rate, death rate, policy, etc. How can we as civil society be sure that we are building the accurate evidence in the dearth or the absence of so much data?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Nigeria as a country do not have adequate data. It's not that we don't have anything, but we have some. And then also we can also look at data from the angle of what international partners or donors have also put in place. And so for me, data issue is one evidence for the fact that we have identified that we do not have adequate data and we have to rely on either external data sources, shows that there is a huge gap. So that is already an advocacy issue for us to begin to engage, because now we know we don't have the requisite data, but it's not completely that we don't have, it's just that it's inadequate and is insufficient. So with the little we have, we can begin to use that as a basis or a baseline for engagement. We can use that also as the basis to interact with the requisite people, which is MBS. That is the repository of all data of whatever kind we may be thinking about, as with regards to what you have just, the issue of population, the issue of death rate and poverty and birth rates and all of that. So we can use whatever we have, no matter how little, to form the basis for engagement. Just that we need to ensure that that little that we are having, we are quoting it correctly and we are referencing it correctly, in as much as we also make use of secondary data, as well as interacting with external data sources. So it's a huge issue. I don't want to see it as a problem, it's an issue. That means there's an opportunity for us to begin to engage already as social accountability advocates, to be able to say, okay, government of Nigeria, this is a huge area that we need to bring in investment. Because when you're talking about changes, they're also looking at issues of investment. So for me, this is appropriate for us to start small. But even though you are starting small, make sure there is integrity, there's genuinity in what you're doing. And also you can reference the external data sources. And then from there, you will be able to build a balance. But for us as CSO, this is a huge area that we can begin to invest in, to be able to engage with government of Nigeria, to be able to do the right things at the right time and as when due. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Doctor, for your response to that question. A number of people are asking for the presentation slides. Please rest assured that the slides will be shared after the session. But to ensure that you get the slide, please put your email addresses as well as other information on your biodata the age grade you fall into, your position, your name, are you a PWD or not, in the chat box, so that we can get this information on the back end and ensure that everyone in attendance gets the PowerPoint slides after the session. Thank you. All right, next question is, what is the best way that civil society can monitor budgets? I know you talked about participatory budget monitoring to ensure accountability, especially at the subnational level.
Okay, the best way to monitor budget is the fact that at the implementation level of budget at any level, whether local government, state government, or national level, you need to begin to engage with who are the custodians. You know, in the earlier part, I said there is a need for you to, that's when we discuss issues around the champions, the pillars. I thought you need to engage with, you need to identify who are the champions. That is number one. Because if you know who are the relevant stakeholders you should be interacting with, you will know at which point you will come in to be able to monitor this budget. And for me, you need to start from the beginning. That is, at the preparatory stage, you should be able to get yourself involved. For instance, when I was actively managing, when I was the National Coordinator for Association for Orphans and Vulnerable Children, I always go to the Ministry of Women Affairs, because then the issue of social development was, and orphans were still under them before it was moved in 2019 to humanitarian. I go to them to say, okay, what are the things you think you want to do for children, especially orphans and vulnerable children? Can we begin to talk? And you know, the call for memoranda and all of that. I make sure we make our input into it. And because I have made my input into it, I write officially to demand, once it is, they have concluded and put it together and synergize all their efforts, to ask, okay, can I have a look at these documents so that I know what you have put in there, so that from that point, I begin to say, okay, at this social period, we're expected to have done 1, 2, 3. I'm already monitoring the budget. And then at every point, I go back to them and say, okay, I noticed that 1, 2, 3 was not done. What were the issues? I use what we call appreciative inquiry. When you go to want to monitor and you are beginning to look at only the negative side, you will never get a headway. So from the beginning, from the preparatory stage, get yourself involved. And then when they begin to implement the budget, also get yourself involved. And when I talk about appreciative inquiry, I'm not talking about you coming and saying, why is this like this? For instance, if I see a bottled water and it's like, okay, for instance, this is a bottled water. I'm sure a lot of you say, this bottle is empty. But for me, I see it as a quarter full. I don't know if I'm saying something. To you, it will look like 3/4 is empty. But for me, I see a quarter full bottle. So when I come and I'm saying, oh, yes, you have done very well, you are on the right track. However, what are those issues that have made you not to be able to do 1, 2, 3? They are not coming as a police officer to police them. They are not coming as a witch hunter to witch hunt them. But they see you genuinely as wanting to understand and appreciate why things are not going the way it should go. There's nobody that will hold information from you. So looking at all of that, there is a need for us to have the advocacy skills and to have the requisite skills to be able to interact, for them to give us access to whatever information we want. So monitoring the budget starts at the implementation stage, from the formulation stage or the preparatory stage, and then you go all through the way to even impact evaluation. So your skills, your capabilities will determine the best way to go. But for me, the best way is be fully involved from the preparatory stages, that is the formulation stage. Also, you should also do independent shadow budgets, which you will use to support whatever processes, so that way they know that you have them in mind and you're not coming to witch hunt or to be able to harass them. And then having the appreciative inquiry methodology has always worked. I don't know if I've answered you if you are satisfied with that.
I believe you've done justice to the question, Doctor. Just go straight into the next question. How can CSOs form a critical mass to hold policymakers accountable? So this is talking more of coalitions and collaborations across civil society organizations in holding policymakers accountable.
Okay, to form a critical mass, number one, you must identify those with shared vision. What is that problem you have identified that you want to be able to bring about the social, the positive changes you desire? And then once you identify the problem, who share your vision? And then based on those that share your vision, you need to also identify what are the capacities and abilities and skills that are already in existence so that you'll be able to harness that. And all of that, without trust, we cannot make a headway. And then all of us, we need to look at the bigger picture. But a lot of us, most times we are looking at the smaller picture, which is me, myself alone. And so if we can become selflessness built upon the other issues I have the other elements I have just described, then we can come together to speak holistically. And that is why I said there is a need to institutionalize certain aspects of advocacy. And then there are some that is bigger than one person. Like when we're talking about the health bill, it's not just those that were in the health sector that came together to push for the bill to be passed. They reached out to all civil society, because when you look at health, just as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not the absence of sickness completely, but also looking at the totality of the well-being of the individual that will say the person is healthy. So looking at that, we need to look at the bigger picture. And then when there is need for us to ad hocly come together to talk about a particular issue, we will not come in. But institutionalization of our advocacy efforts will help us to be able to speak as a critical mass towards every issue. And for you to be able to come to that, you need to be able to identify what the issues or the areas you want to be covering. You need to look at what are the shared vision among all of you. Are all of us coming because I feel I'm going to gain something? It shouldn't be, what am I going to gain immediately? Do you have a long-term goal that you want to achieve? So these are things you look out for. And then because similar, how will it, the more the merrier. And when you have similar affiliations, you tend to be stronger. Just as I said earlier, one broomstick cannot sweep, but when you have a bunch of broomsticks, you will be able to sweep effectively. So looking at all of this and institutionalizing the advocacy movement will be able to help us to speak as a critical mass towards any kind of issue that we might have encountered, or that we want to see the positive changes that we are looking at. So coalition building is very key for you to be able to speak to the critical mass. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ma. Before I read the next question, I noticed some participants are dropping their questions in the chat box. There's a lot of messages there, so we might get lost in the process. So please use the Q&A tab for the questions so that I can easily identify them and then bring them to the attention of Doctor for her answer. I'll just move to the next question. So this person says, from your experience, Dr. Grace, can you narrate to us any experience you have when a civil society organization applied one of these social accountability tools that resulted in a policy change?
Okay, I just gave an example of when I was the National Coordinator of Association for Orphans and Vulnerable Children. Before then, the only thing Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development were budgeting for instance, were just issues around Children's Day celebration. That was their budget. And so, but a lot of issues were affecting orphans and vulnerable children. So when AYON, that's Association for Orphans and Vulnerable Children, came together, is a membership-based organization where organizations, that community-based, national NGOs, faith-based, came together to begin to speak with one voice to issues of orphans and vulnerable children. Beyond the Children's Day celebration, we're able to enable supporting them and all of that, engaging with the Ministry of Women Affairs. They started giving grants to CSOs that were taking care of these orphans and vulnerable children. They started initially by giving it to 6 NGOs, one from each of the geopolitical zone. But as at the end of about over a period of about 7 years, I thought that it was not just one part geopolitical zone, but they now had grants for interventions for orphans and vulnerable children. That is from service delivery point of view. I also mentioned earlier in the course of my presentation that I built the capacity of some CSOs in Borno State on issues around maternal, on child and maternal health. The truth was, it was actually have to have safe spaces and spacing of children, including the utilization of sexual and reproductive health consumables. The state government was not having a provision as at that time, that's 2019, thereabout, for providing things as simple as I don't know, this injectable for women to prevent pregnancy. Is it IDU? I be IUD. That don't mind me. So when we engaged with the support from the funder does not want their identity disclosed. So I will not mention the funder, but the international NGO that was handling it was Care International. With the coming of that and supporting them, because I actually supported them in the program design and everything before even building advocacy capacity. By the year 2020, Borno State government had a budget in through not just Ministry of Health, but also Information, Ministry of Education. They now had budget lines to be able to provide sexual and reproductive health services holistically with more emphasis on the maternal health, so that it brought about child spacing and all of that. And so from the policy, after the training in 2019, we engaged with them at the preparatory stage of the state budget. And then when it was now going to be passed before it became the appropriation bill, we made sure that at every stage, those organizations were interfacing. And then we had to bring in people like UNICEF at some point, people like Save the Children came in at some point, so that we had more people, and then Planned International, then Planned Parenthood. I think Planned Parenthood were part of it. We brought all of them into the advocacy move, and then there was budgetary allocation, and now they institutionalized the fact that everything that had to do with health of mothers take top priority in Borno State. You can go and fact check if you want to see at least the budget from 2020 till date, especially under this current governor, Professor Zulum. You will see that there is an increased budgetary allocation for health related interventions, especially maternal and child care. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Grace. I think we have one more question. The others are comments. Say, people see you as an enemy once you start holding stakeholders accountable or demanding for accountability. Can you talk more about the skills or strategies needed to get results when advocating for social accountability?
All right, thank you very much. There are skills, there are several skills that you require. Advocacy is not courtesy visit. Some of us will just go visit and say, okay, we have done advocacy visit. So I will always ask, what change did you now get from that particular visit? So it entails a lot of things. Just as I mentioned in passing, for you to do an advocacy, there are certain criteria that must, and certain elements and certain things that must be in place. But for you as an individual, number one, you need to have an objective mind towards whatever issues you are going to be advocating for whatever issues you want to bring about change for. And then number two, you should be able to do what we call the problem analysis. And there is, even if people see you as an enemy, if you do not have concrete evidence, you don't have data to back whatever, no matter how little, you don't have data to back what you're saying, it will be termed to be what? Falsehood or witch hunting. But when you have evidence, and it's an evidence issue-based advocacy, no matter how it is, you will succeed. It may take time, but it will definitely succeed. And one of the issues we normally have in the course of trying to do advocacy and why we draw up a lot of enemies is that a lot of us tend to lose focus easily from what the issues are and begin to look at people or persons or character issue rather than concentrating on what the issue are. For instance, it's in the public glare right now, certain decisions that some people have come out to say that they're influenced. And if anybody like NBA, okay, let me be very particular. For instance, we are talking about cleansing the judiciary because like certain discussions in certain quarters have said even the hope of the common man has been lost because of several allegations of corruption against the judiciary. So if you want to take up issues of corruption in the judiciary, a lot of people will see you as an enemy. But by the time you come up and you have your fact that in social decision, for instance, if we are going to be talking, the issue of Lawan and Machina is a very concrete evidence of miscarriage of justice if you look at it from all parameters, based on the evidence that was adduced. But also, that is from, if you look at it from the point of morality. But when you look at it from the point of the law, you will discover that there was no miscarriage of justice because the facts that were presented and evidence presented in court could not have given Machina the so-called right justice approach that the common man expects. So looking at that, the evidence is showing that, yes, we are supposed to give it to Machina, but the evidence before the law court showed that it's Lawan that was given. So you now say, it's the miscarriage of justice, and you start raising a lot of issues. But the evidence that you will have should be the one that is truthful, integrity-wise, it's not compromised. And if they had not compromised the integrity of the case of Machina, I'm sure maybe the story would have been a different issue. So looking at that, your ability to identify truth, because the law is not morality, for instance, that is the common saying. Law is not morality. We base whatever we have on evidence and facts. So if you say a lot of, and then because there are so many lacunas in our law, it becomes an issue of technicality, even though we shouldn't sacrifice justice on the altar of technicality. So it's a little bit tricky because you need to make sure that your information is concrete, the evidence is watertight, and then you yourself, you have the requisite skills for engagement with whoever you need to engage with at whatever point. And then we should focus on the issues and not on persons or personalities. And then you need to go objectively in handling your case. And then also there are steps you need to follow when you're talking about advocacy. I need to know when to use what to. For instance, you can use lobbying in carrying out advocacy. And just as I said at the beginning of this meeting, giving a bribery is not lobbying. If we know that bribery is not lobbying, there are several ways that you can go about to get whatever change you want without compromise. You need to also identify who are the key stakeholders. And when you talk about your stakeholders, you look for both those that have great influence. You look at those that have influence and power. You need, no matter the level of power and influence, you must identify even the naysayers. You need to identify it because you need to know what angle they'll be coming from so that you prepare a requisite and strategies that can also counter whatever negative moves they are going to be bringing. So it's a whole lot of things that you need to take into cognizance when you're talking about advocacy. And also you yourself, you need to know your limits, define your criteria. When I say define your criteria, I'm simply saying when you know you do not have capacity, please don't even start it. A lot of us like copying and pasting without having capacity to paste. Let me give you a practical example. In the past, somebody asked me to help them provide some technical support, and I needed to include like a CV. So I didn't have time to help. The person had all the data, had all the qualification, had all it took, but the person did not know how to arrange them properly. And that period, I was so engaged, and I said, okay, for me to do a holistic review, here is how to write a standard CV. The person copied my curriculum vitae, line, hook, and sinker. The person did not even realize she's not a lawyer, she's not a PhD holder. So when they sent it to me for review, I started laughing. I said, okay, the truth is you don't have capacity to paste. And then you don't have capacity to paste, please don't copy. Because beyond copy, you need to make sure that it is tailored right. So since that day, I also learned a lesson that when somebody asks me if I'm very busy, I shouldn't tempt the person to copy my work, but I should be able to guide the person, no matter how little, to be able to come up, and then I should have the person to review. So in the same vein, when you don't have capacity to paste, please don't start something, and then be focused, and then I believe that at the end, you'll be able to succeed. And reach out to people with similar minds. Don't think you know it all. Nobody knows it all. Every day, when I wake up, I unlearn what I've learned yesterday so that I can be able to relearn for the day. So you learn, you unlearn, and you relearn. And if you're able to be able to do all of that, I can assure you that you will have the desired change, and you will be able to be also identify who is the charismatic person that can be able to pull together every other person that will support this idea. It may be your idea, but you may not have the charisma to bring other people to the table. So there are a lot of skills involved. There are a lot of competences involved. There are a lot of capacity issue involved when you want to be able to do an advocacy. Advocacy training on its own is a separate training that you need to learn what the different skills entails for you to be able to do an effective advocacy. I use the word effective because courtesy call, I'm running out. Courtesy call is not advocacy visit. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. We have two more questions, but for time, we'll take just one, and we would respond to the other and the three other questions. I see some from the chat box. When we're sending the slides, Dr. Grace will give a response to that, and we'll send it across to everyone, because we're trying to make sure we round up before the top of the hour of 1 p.m. And so this question is, congratulations you for your job in Borno, increased budgetary allocations, just like you did in Borno for health, but there was no release. So the question is, did your the policy change that you got, did it result in release of the budget or just provisions?
Okay, there was release, but not full release. Because once we got it into getting them to allocate, it's also another gamut of advocacy work for releases to come in. And not just releases, you also need to do a lot of work for it to be used for what it was meant for. So we had partial, and we're still on, it's still an ongoing conversation, because some local governments bought into the idea and not just appropriating it, but we're also releasing. And also for some of them that actually there was release is because there was counterpart funding from the donor and the partner that was implementing. So that encouraged them, but it wasn't 100% release. I didn't add that part because I was trying to just talk about the allocation and what to bring about those changes, because the question was the change. What change did we get? So there were releases, but it wasn't 100%. And the factors that necessitated the release was, one, the political will was there in some local government and even in some state ministries, line ministries that were in the part of the coordination platform. And also another succeeding factor was the fact that there was a counterpart funding from the donor through their implementing partner that saw the running of the project. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Grace. I wish we could go on and on and on. This has been enlightening and engaging, but we do have to begin to round up now. It has been my pleasure to moderate this webinar, and thank you for attending, and hope to see you again on subsequent editions of the Scale webinar series that will be organized by ACIOE Associates. So thank you for your time this afternoon. Do have a lovely weekend. Until we see ourselves next time, keep working, keep advocating, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you and bye-bye.